4 goals to run. Right, the time is 4:46. It is Sunday afternoon, and it is time to bring you the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Jack Nicholls, it is all yours.
Thank you very much, Gigi. The second race of the Formula One World Championship getting underway in a little under 15 minutes' time. And the championship leader, Max Verstappen, is starting down in 15th on the grid. It's his Red Bull teammate, Sergio Perez, that will start on pole position. Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin alongside him. George Russell is third for Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton is down in 7th in what is set to be a fascinating Grand Prix. Alongside me is the runner-up in the W Series, Alice Powell. And Alice, Verstappen, there's a chance he can win this race. There's a chance he can get up towards the front. But I think one of the big things is going to be getting through the opening lap today for Verstappen, starting down in 15th.
Certainly is, Jack. I mean, we've seen some frantic, okay, we've raced here twice, but both times we've seen some frantic moves. We've had a red flag as well in the 2021. It's a tough first lap. It's a fast circuit. It's quite narrow, especially sector 1. So, yeah, he needs to try and keep out of trouble, which, you know, is a lot easier said than done. A bit of debris that could fly off his car, a puncture, anything like that, very small bit of contact, and you could be in the wall. So that's the challenge. I would say that's probably going to be likely the only challenge for him for this race so far. It's surviving the opening lap.
Christian Horner, the team principal of Red Bull, was asked a few moments ago about whether Verstappen could come through and win. He said, oh, maybe he can get to the podium, maybe, but now even that would be an amazing drive. He's kind of downplaying it, isn't he? Or rather, starting to upsell the drive that Verstappen ultimately is going to have.
Yeah, exactly. He knows that Max is unstoppable. We've seen him at Spa when he had to start quite far back down the grid, how quickly he got through the field there. Okay, different circuit, but yeah, he's just trying to play down it, but he's fully expecting Max to be in the top 5, I would say, quite quickly.
So we mentioned this street circuit in Jeddah, just on the western shore of Saudi Arabia, next to the Red Sea. The sun has set. It's just coming up to 8 o'clock local time, and this night race is floodlit all the way around this incredibly high-speed circuit. It's tight, it's narrow. There's a rather mesmerizing drone show going on in the sky over the moment, over the track, which is quite remarkable. But it's the fastest street circuit in the world here. It's a real challenge for the drivers, even when they're just driving by themselves, Alice.
Yeah, you're full throttle for 70%, over 70% of the lap, and that is a lot. That's a lot of time to be on that go pedal. And you know, for cars that are going to be following each other, it makes it tough. But we've seen some fantastic overtaking. The DRS detection zone has moved to the outs, or the exit of the final corner now. So we're not going to see people slam on the brakes. We're not going to have a repeat of Lewis and Max that we did in 2021, where, you know, they were up in arms saying, "Hey, he crashed into the back of me." But that was just to try and make sure neither one had DRS going down the main straight. So it's going to be tough, because these cars will be full of fuel for the start of the race. So the cars are going to feel a handful, more than some of the cars already do at the moment, you know, going through that fast midsection of circuit. But it's a fantastic circuit. One that I would love to have the opportunity. I'm sure many drivers do. Driving around a street circuit is special, but especially one like this that's so fast and thrilling. And it has produced fantastic racing so far.
Sergio Perez, then, is the man starting at the front of the grid. He took pole position yesterday by a couple of tenths of a second over Charles Leclerc. Leclerc has a 10-place grid drop, so as a result, he will start in 12th. Perez has 4 Formula One wins to his name. All of the eyes, sort of in the early stages, will be on how quickly can Verstappen come through. He's the championship leader, but he's only 7 points ahead of Sergio Perez. Okay, we're in race 2 of 23, so a long way to go. Does Perez, is he sort of the favourite to win this Grand Prix starting on pole position, or the second favourite?
Well, technically he is the favourite, because he's starting at the front and Max is so far down. But Max's pace all weekend has been astonishing. It's been incredible. It's typical Max. You know, he's definitely been ahead of Perez, and it was probably a sigh of relief for Perez's point of view when he saw that Max had an issue, because he knew then this is really my chance to get another pole position. Obviously he was pole position here last year, so he has good history with this circuit. But he is the favourite, but Max is just so quick. It's first lap survive and then we'll see, but he's just being phenomenal at the minute.
So if Verstappen catches Perez and the two Red Bull teammates are fighting it out for the victory, I'm really interested to see how that unfolds, because if Verstappen has the pace, he'll just drive past and overtake. But so often in Formula One history, we've seen teams decide, right, once we're running first and second, we just bring it home and take the win. But that isn't necessarily the way Red Bull have operated over the last few years.
No, exactly, but I can't see them doing team orders at this point. I can't see them saying, right, Sergio, Max is way quicker than you, let him through, unless there's a real threat from behind and they're just slowing each other down. I can't see that. I expect, like you said, Max to close the gap and make the move on Sergio, but there's history between these two. Sergio knows that Max is sort of the Red Bull prince as such, so he's going to want to, Sergio, he's going to want to sort of make his mark and say, hang on, Max, I'm still here. Yeah, everyone loves you at Red Bull, but I'm still here. So he's going to put up a fight, and as I said, there's history between these two. Okay, apparently it's all calmed down, but we heard from Andrew yesterday that it hasn't. There's still whispers that there could still be a little bit of tension between the two of them. So, yeah, we could have a bit of a Red Bull fight, because they're both going to want to win at the end of the day.
Yeah, Max Verstappen is under the belief or the impression that Sergio Perez intentionally crashed in the Monaco Grand Prix qualifying last year in order to start in front of Verstappen, and that was something that sort of lived with Verstappen as the season went on. Outside of the two, and it culminated in the Brazilian Grand Prix last year, where Verstappen refused to help Perez in his fight for second in the championship. Outside of the two Red Bulls, it's Fernando Alonso starting second on the grid. Russell will be third on the grid for Mercedes, fourth for Carlos Sainz and fifth for Lance Stroll. Esteban Ocon in sixth, Hamilton seventh, Piastri eighth, ninth for Gasly, 10th for Nico Hülkenberg. Tough day for Lewis Hamilton yesterday in qualifying, only lining up seventh on the grid. He was asked, what can you do in the Grand Prix? Who are you racing? He was sort of like, well, the cars around me, really. I'll try and go forward. But he was even mentioning some of the cars behind he needs to keep an eye on.
Yeah, he's not having a fun time at the moment, is he, in his Mercedes? He described it as miserable, and we heard straight after qualifying yesterday, his interview, he basically, I just turned up, got in the car, drove it, did the best I could, and that was pretty much it. So he's certainly not happy at the moment in his Mercedes.
Right, we are just 6 minutes away from the start of the formation lap in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. We'll be keeping you up to date with all's goings on at Old Trafford meanwhile, so let's head there now. Lee Blakeman.
Hello, Jack. Manchester United 0, Fulham.
This is 5 Live Formula One with Jack Nicholls.
The second race of the 2023 Formula One World Championship season getting underway imminently here on 5 Live. Sergio Perez is starting on pole position in the Red Bull. Down in 15th on the grid is the man who dominated the opening race of the year, Max Verstappen. He had to retire from qualifying yesterday after a drive shaft failure, so he will be trying to fight his way through the field. Aside of the two Red Bulls, Fernando Alonso starts second on the grid and George Russell starts third. Alice Powell, British racing driver, is alongside me. And Alice, Fernando Alonso has sort of excited everybody this season simply by being back near the front of the field. Has he got any shot of winning this one?
He certainly has. I mean, race pace from the Aston Martins hasn't looked as strong as the Red Bull, but this is Saudi Arabia. We've seen the history of this circuit. If you go by the past two races, anything can happen here. The scraps can be pretty intense, so he's going to want to make sure, he knows he needs to try and get in front of Sergio at the start. We've seen Alonso, if there's a gap, he certainly goes for it. So if I was Perez, I'd be thinking, well, Fernando's technically got nothing to lose. He said he was just happy to sort of be on the podium, but he's going to want to get that win. He's a racing driver, an experienced racing driver at that. So I expect him to give it a good go heading down into turn one and throughout the first lap, because he knows he needs to try and jump the Red Bull and then hope that they keep scrapping behind, so then he can eventually pull out over a second so he can break that DRS, and then he can try and manage it from them on. And there is a reasonable amount of room at the first corner if he does fancy a bit of a lunge. Yeah, there is. I mean, we saw, I think it's 3 wide in 2021 with Esteban Ocon on the outside, Lewis in the middle, and Max, he just saw that gap and went for it. So it is possible. There's no barrier on the outside there, so we have seen several drivers in an F2 race earlier on today sort of cut that corner, that turn 2, and they've got away with it because the stewards sort of going, it's the first lap, people get pushed wide, we'll let you off unless it's an obvious cut. So there is room there, and I think we'll find that we'll see a few drivers try and make the lunge, and George Russell as well. He's had a win, only one win so far. He certainly deserves to have more, so he'll fancy his chances too down into turn 1.
Yeah, he's third on the grid for the Mercedes team, with Carlos Sainz fourth for Ferrari, but it will be Perez on pole. As far as strategy is concerned, anticipating it to be a one pit stop race over the hour and 20 minutes that are to come, and pretty much everyone in the field will be starting on the medium compound of tyre. Lewis Hamilton in 7th has opted for the hard compound. Charles Leclerc in 12th has opted for the soft compound, and Lando Norris in 19th, after he hit the wall during qualifying yesterday, he's also gone for the soft tyres. So Hamilton and Leclerc both feeling they're a little out of position, but both kind of taking opposite looks at it. Hamilton kind of playing the long game on the hard tyre and will try and go a long way into the Grand Prix. Leclerc 12th on the grid with a soft tyre. That's to give him some more grip off the line, and he'll want to fight in the early stages, I think. Yeah,
he knows the start's crucial. Obviously, we've touched on that, trying to stay out of trouble. He's another one that's starting right in the mix there. Verstappen is a couple of spots behind him, but he's opted to just get that launch, get a good position going into turn 1, hopefully stay out of trouble. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure that the hard tyre can go 40 laps. Is that correct? Into the Grand Prix, so we could see Lewis stay out there for quite a long time.
So the grid is now starting to be cleared. The final mechanics pull away the tyre warmers, and now it's just the 20 cars and drivers that are left on the grid on the Jeddah Corniche Street circuit, with Sergio Perez getting set to start the second race of the season from pole position. All the way down in 15th place is the championship leader and the winner of the opening race, Max Verstappen. The cars pull away on their grid slots now for the formation lap. It's 5 o'clock here on BBC Radio 5 Live. This, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. The cars weaving around, trying to get some temperature into their tyres and brakes before the crucial start of this race. And this is the grid. Sergio Perez starts on pole position for Red Bull. Fernando Alonso alongside him in the Aston Martin. George Russell is third. Carlos Sainz is fourth, with Lance Stroll in fifth. Esteban Ocon, Lewis Hamilton, Oscar Piastri, Pierre Gasly and Nico Hülkenberg complete the top 10. Then it's Joe, Leclerc, Magnussen, Bottas and Max Verstappen in 15th. Tsunoda, Albon, De Vries, Norris and Sargent complete the 20 drivers. So Verstappen sprinting away early on in the formation lap there, with Fernando Alonso and everybody else having to push fairly hard to try and catch up with him. Sorry, Perez, of course. As you see a Red Bull at the front, it's got to be Verstappen, isn't it? So yeah, sorry, Sergio Perez pulling away quite quickly at the start on this formation lap, and quite a high speed actually formation lap. Quite often you see the cars going very slowly around here to try and keep their tyres in the best possible condition, but it's a little bit of a different setup in Saudi Arabia, because they'll want as much temperature as possible.
Yeah, I mean, track temperature is slightly, actually it's fairly similar, to be honest with you, compared to qualifying yesterday, a degree or so difference. But yeah, Sergio is really gone out the blocks there. Either he's trying to send a secret message to say, I'm not going to be hanging about at the start here. But yeah, now is the time where the drivers will really try and build the core temperature in the tyres. They'll weave to left to right. They use the brakes. You don't want to heat them up too quickly. You don't want to get the graining even in these temperatures, because once you get the graining on the tyres, the surface of the tyre, it's so hard to get the tyre back. 6:06
follows us here on 5 Live in about an hour and a half's time. The lines are open if you want to speak to Robbie and Chris, 08085 909 693. But the cars are now coming through the final left-hand corner at turn 27 and will make their way to line up on the grid before the short sprint down towards the first corner. Sergio Perez in his Red Bull, looking for his 5th Formula One career victory. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, haven't mentioned him too much. He was a front runner in the Grand Prix in Bahrain, but ended up retiring due to an electrical problem. Obviously a championship well, I was going to say contender last year. He was kind of the man who pushed Verstappen the closest, but he had to take a 10-place grid drop, so he's down in 12th place, Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. He and Verstappen will be looking to carve through the order as quickly as they possibly can. Sergio Perez has already lined up in his pole position spot under the floodlights in Jeddah. Max Verstappen, his teammate, coming now through to line up in 15th position. Hamilton in 7th is sort of in the middle of that front pack as well. Fernando Alonso is on the inside for the run down towards the first corner. Turn 1, a 90-degree left-hander. So Alonso, if he gets a good getaway, could take the lead. There's a lot of smoke coming from the front brakes of the other Aston Martin of Lance Stroll, who's lining up in 5th position. But Fernando Alonso in 2nd place would love to lead a Grand Prix again. The final car on the grid is going to be Logan Sargent in the Williams, the American, making only his 2nd Formula One start. All the cars are in position. Perez on pole, Alonso alongside him on the front row. Hamilton 7th, Verstappen's in 15th. A lot of places to look, but on the run down towards the first corner, what can Sergio Perez do? It's a reasonable start. Alonso's coming to the inside, and Alonso might get the lead here. Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin takes the lead of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Perez slots into 2nd place. 3rd is George Russell. 4th is Carlos Sainz. Lance Stroll is still in 5th position as they come down towards turn 4 for the first time. But Perez did not get a good getaway. There's a bit of carbon fibre flying up that's come off Oscar Piastri. He's got a bit of damage to the car. Verstappen has managed to survive the opening few corners, but he hasn't made a huge amount of progress. Charles Leclerc has made some good ground. A little bit of a run wide there from Piastri. I think he's struggling with damage to the front right of his front wing. And meanwhile, Lance Stroll is on the attack, trying to pass Carlos Sainz around the outside as they come into turn 13, and he's pulled it off. Really impressive move from Lance Stroll to get ahead of the Ferrari, and he now gets up into 4th position. But Fernando Alonso pouncing at the start and taking the lead of the race away from Sergio Perez. Great start, Alice Powell.
Yeah, but just come up on the screens, incident involving car 14. That is Alonso, incorrect starting location. So out of his grid box or too far forward. And Piastri, I've got damage. So yeah, you can see damage front wing for him, but Alonso, perfect getaway, and that's what he needed to do. He just got that launch. The first phase looked not too bad. It was that 2nd phase where he really got Perez, but Perez has not given up. He's right on the tail of the Aston Martin.
Coming through to complete lap 1 then, Fernando Alonso in the lead. We'll have a look at what exactly his grid position was, hopefully in a few moments' time. Meanwhile, Oscar Piastri is doing his best to try and defend from the cars behind. He might even come into the pits here for a new front wing, and here comes Perez going back to try and get the lead from Fernando Alonso into the first corner, but he's not quite able to pull it off. The order at the end of lap 1, Fernando Alonso leading, Perez 2nd, George Russell 3rd, Lance Stroll 4th, 5th is Carlos Sainz, Ocon, Hamilton, Gasly, Leclerc and Zhou are the rest of the top 10. Max Verstappen has gained 2 places, one of them by virtue of Oscar Piastri having to come into the pits. He's up into 13th spot behind the 2 Haas cars. Hamilton's remained in 7th. Charles Leclerc gained 3 places on the opening lap. He's gone from 12th up into 9th. So, Fernando Alonso leading, but under investigation for incorrect starting location. He's been given a 5-second time penalty, Alonso. So Alonso lined up in the wrong place on the grid. We haven't seen a replay of it just yet, but we saw Esteban Ocon do this in Bahrain, and he had a 5-second time penalty, but that's a very odd error for Fernando Alonso to make.
Yeah, it is. I mean, typically you would use the grid boxes, you know, in front of you to line up. He obviously had no grid boxes in front of him, but you drive over those grid boxes to really try and line up. So we'll have to wait until we get a replay here to actually try and see what it is. But either if he's too far forward, so he's over, there's a yellow line. If he's too far over that yellow line where you use that to line your wheel up, or he's either too far to the left or too far to the right, so he's then out of his grid box. So we'll have a little look.
This is 357th Formula One start, so that's a real quite remarkable one from Alonso. He's holding the lead at the moment, and he'll want to keep the lead. Even though he's got a 5-second time penalty, he will serve that in his pit stop. When he comes into the pits, he will have to wait 5 seconds before the team can get to work changing the tyres on the Aston Martin. So until then, he's still going to be fighting it out, really, with Sergio Perez to try and finish as far up the order as he can. Max Verstappen's not making huge progress here. He's stuck behind Nico Hülkenberg, still in 13th position, but DRS, the drag reduction system, is now enabled, so he'll be able to open the flap in his rear wing if he's within a second of the car in front. Here's Alonso's radio.
OK, Fernando, so we have got a 5-second penalty at the pit stop for grid position at the start, so we'll bear that in mind. 5-second penalty at the first pit stop. Copy.
Well, he's very chilled about it.
Yeah.
I'd be a bit more angry if I got a penalty, but this for Perez now, we can see he's dropped back slightly, so the team would have lightly informed him, right, he's got a penalty, we don't need to do anything crazy, we don't need to risk anything, so he needs to keep an eye on the gap behind him, but he can drift out slightly from Alonso's dirty air as it was. But you touched on Max Verstappen. The issue he's got now, we saw it again in a Formula 2 race that are racing here this weekend, is he's stuck in that DRS train. So the car in front, the car in front, the car in front, they've all got DRS, which makes it even harder for him to pass down that main straight.
Lap 3 of 50, Fernando Alonso leading, Perez second, Russell third, Stroll fourth, Sainz in fifth, Ocon, Hamilton, Gasly, Leclerc and Zhou the rest of the top 10. Oscar Piastri pitted for McLaren to move on to the... And here comes Perez again for the lead of the race. Sergio Perez to the inside into turn 1. Big lock-up, but he gets it stopped. And Sergio Perez in the Red Bull is back into the lead of the Grand Prix that he lost at the start to Fernando Alonso. But now he's sent it down the inside of the Aston Martin driver, down into the first corner. And Perez is back in the lead. Alonso down to second position. George Russell in third, Lance Stroll in fourth, Sainz in fifth. Perez doesn't fancy hanging around.
No, he doesn't. It must have been some kind of mistake, as we're going to see a replay of the start. And yeah, so Fernando too far to the left, so he's out of his grid box. That is a rookie error, and we can see now on board. We're looking at on board from Sainz, and it's clear to see he's just too far to the left, and that is a rookie error. But he did get a fantastic launch. Went for the gap down the inside. Reaction time not as good as Perez, but it was that second phase of the start where he managed to sneak through, and Verstappen there just being pretty cautious. He knows he needed to stay out of trouble, but I wonder if Fernando made a mistake, because the gap was over a second, so Perez must have put him under pressure, and we're going to see what happened to Oscar Piastri. So he got a really good launch as well. They're all bunching up heading down to turn 1. He goes left, goes right, bit cautious going in, and he's going to make contact with...
He was really cautious, wasn't he? Desperate to try and keep out of trouble, but then had some contact with the Alpine, I think, of Pierre Gasly.
So, I mean, that's, again, inexperience. He hasn't raced for over a year. He won the Formula 2 championship, but then obviously had to sit out for that year. But you could tell there, he knew he was starting in the top 10, wanted to try and stay there. But the thing is, we're being a bit cautious. You can drift back into the pack, and that's exactly what happened with him. As we are seeing a replay, that's what we're listening to, but we're not going to see it now. We're going to see how Perez got past, and that was a simple checkmate, easy, move to the left, inside move, locked up, managed to get it stopped. But that must have been a mistake from Fernando at some point in that last sector, because he was over a second ahead.
Checo, mate. Sergio Perez leading the way then. 0.7 of a second ahead of Fernando Alonso in second position. Alonso staying within DRS range at the moment. It's then 1.6 seconds back to George Russell, who's running in third place. He's only half a second ahead of Lance Stroll, so Lance Stroll is starting to put pressure on George Russell for the final podium position. Fifth is Carlos Sainz, sixth is Ocon, Hamilton is seventh, eighth is Gasly, ninth is Leclerc, and 10th is Zhou. I was mentioning earlier on, just before the overtake for the lead, but Lando Norris has pitted as well in the other McLaren, so front wing damage for Piastri and front wing damage for Norris. They've gone out on the hard tyre, and another difficult day for McLaren after they ended the first race of the season with Piastri retiring from the Grand Prix and Norris finishing dead last. They're now both running in dead last positions, even though that's not necessarily their pace right now. Alonso within DRS range as he comes out over the start-finish straight. Not quite as quick as Sergio Perez on that last lap, and not quite close enough to make an attack into the first corner. Lance Stroll is still pretty close to the back of George Russell for third. Hamilton is weaving to try and defend from Pierre Gasly in seventh position, and they've now been joined by Charles Leclerc. So Hamilton in seventh, Gasly in 8th, Leclerc is in 9th, Hülkenberg has just got ahead of Magnussen, and actually Verstappen has got ahead of both of the Haas drivers. So Verstappen has now got up into 11th place, and his next target will be Zhou Guanyu, the Chinese racer for Alfa Romeo, who is currently completing that top 10. Alice Powell.
Yeah, I mean, Leclerc's pace is looking pretty strong, but he is on the soft tyre. So Max is making his way through now as the Saudi crew is on board of Max, just getting a little bit snap of oversteer there, where they've tightened up the corner there to stop people carrying too much speed. We've had some big accidents, but yeah, he's just struggling to make moves. We've kind of trying to work out how long it would take him to get to the front, and we sort of say, well, in the first 10 laps, but at the moment he's sitting there in 11th.
Yeah, no, I thought maybe lap 10 Verstappen could be at the front, but he's, as you say, only made it up into 11th position, and there's queues forming now behind the two Mercedes. Russell in 3rd is starting to drop back from the two leaders, and Hamilton in 7th is dropping back a little from Esteban Ocon, and he's got Gasly, Leclerc right behind him. Zhou's there lurking in that 10th position. Lap 6 of 50, or make that lap 7 of 50, as Sergio Perez, the race leader, comes across the line in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. And Alonso is still trying to fight Perez for the lead of the Grand Prix. They are right together as they come down towards turn 1. Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc is going for the move on Pierre Gasly. Goes to the outside into the first corner. He's late on the brakes and needs to be careful not to go into the back of Hamilton, but he manages to get it stopped around the outside of Gasly, and a nice little move that from the Monegasque man to move up into 8th position. So Charles Leclerc up into 8th, having started 12th due to a grid penalty. His next target is Hamilton, running in 7th spot. And Gasly will try and go with Leclerc past Hamilton and then past Ocon also, because those two were fighting quite well. But nice move from Leclerc, going to the outside.
Yeah, so sold in the dummy, sort of went left, then a nice late brake. He's going to have more grip because he is on the soft tyre, so he'll be able to brake slightly later than Gasly, who's on the medium tyre, but already he's left Gasly behind and he's in hunt of Lewis Hamilton now.
The gap at the front still under a second. Sergio Perez in the Red Bull ahead of Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, the team he joined over the winter and is now suddenly back to being a front runner in Formula 1 again. Lance Stroll is only 0.8 of a second behind George Russell too in the fight over 3rd and 4th places. Sainz is 5th, Ocon, Hamilton, Leclerc, Gasly and Zhou the top 10. Verstappen is 11th, Hülkenberg 12th, Magnussen 13th, 14th is Tsunoda, 15th is Bottas, Albon, Sargent, De Vries, Piastri and Norris, the 20 drivers. Verstappen's just 0.2 back from Zhou Guanyu now in the fight over 10th position as they come down towards the final corner. They get on the power now down the start-finish straight, and Zhou doesn't have DRS here because he's a little too far back from Pierre Gasly in front, so Verstappen's got an opportunity to try and take 10th place, goes to the inside, and Verstappen is now up into 10th position as they start lap 8 of 50. So Verstappen up into 10th.
Yeah, easy move. Zhou knows that's not my fight. That's not my fight with the Red Bull today, and you don't want to be wasting time, you know, fighting against someone who has clearly got much more speed and out of position. As we're getting up on our screens, race control, Lewis Hamilton weaving on the straight, and I was actually just about to point that out. He's weaving left and right, just trying to break that toe and that DRS of Charles Leclerc behind him. But unfortunately for Lewis, that doesn't seem to be working. He's been noted, he's under investigation, could just be a warning. Doubt it'll be a penalty straight away. He might get a warning flag, but he keeps on doing it, then there will be a penalty. But it's not making a difference to Charles Leclerc at the moment. He's really closed the gap up now.
Yeah, just weaving from left to right down the big long start straight.
Plan A, definitely plan A.
Yeah, I'm trying, mate. I'm trying.
Plan A is the plan for Alonso, and he says he's trying to execute plan A. I mean, surely plan A is lead the Grand Prix.
Well, yeah, I mean, Alonso on the radio always seems like he's just in his living room, doesn't he? He's all chilled out and relaxed, like he's watching the TV. But for him at the moment, where he's lacking behind Perez is in the first sector. It's a couple of tenths as Leclerc surely is going to overtake Lewis Hamilton down this main straight now. He is within inches of Lewis Hamilton, as Lewis he's decided not to do the weaving now. The team obviously let him know. Ferrari closes quickly, dives down the inside, and another easy move for Charles Leclerc.
So Charles Leclerc on the soft compound of tyre in the Ferrari. Hamilton is on the hard tyre compound, so not only is the Ferrari a bit quicker, but he has softer tyres too. Hamilton has now been given a black and white flag for weaving on the straight, which is a warning flag. Don't do it again is the message to Hamilton as he drops down to 8th position. Leclerc then up into 7th place. Verstappen is only half a second back from Pierre Gasly in their fight over 9th position as the Red Bull starts to make his way through the order a little bit more. But Sergio Perez is out in front, just under a second ahead of Fernando Alonso. 3rd is George Russell, 4th is Lance Stroll, 5th is Carlos Sainz, but still Alonso trying to keep in with the battle for the lead. The battle, here's Lewis Hamilton on the radio, saying the grip is really bad on this tyre. Well, he is on the hard tyre, so that is a little bit to be expected. He's in a battle over 8th position now, with Pierre Gasly coming at him. The battle to face Brighton in the FA Cup semi-final is going on at Old Trafford. Half-time, Lee Blakeman.
Manchester United 0, Fulham 0. Not the most exciting of games so far. United have gone close a few times with Rashford and Sabitzer both forcing Leno into smart saves, while McTominay at the end of the half had a shot deflected wide. Fulham have seen a Diop header tipped over by De Gea. Mitrovic and Willian have had efforts off target. Half-time though, Manchester United 0, Fulham 0.
The other semi-final will be Manchester City versus Sheffield United after Sheffield United beat Blackburn with a late winner earlier on this afternoon. And in the Premier League, Arsenal winning 4-1 against Crystal Palace to go 8 points clear at the top of the Premier League heading into the international break. Lap 10 of 50 in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix on the street circuit in Jeddah. Myself, Jack Nicholls, and racing driver Alice Powell alongside you, me for the commentary. And it is Sergio Perez who's leading the way, 1.2 seconds ahead of Fernando Alonso. 3rd is George Russell, 4th is Stroll, 5th is Sainz, Ocon, Leclerc, Hamilton, Verstappen and Gasly, the rest of the top 10. We have seen a few early pit stoppers from the midfield. Valtteri Bottas and Kevin Magnussen have both decided to stick on a hard set of tyres and try to go to the end of this Grand Prix. Verstappen, meanwhile, has got ahead of Pierre Gasly. He's up into 9th place and he's just 1.1 seconds back from Lewis Hamilton.
Oh, this could get interesting, couldn't it? Lewis is not... Well, Lewis knows it's not his fight, but I can't imagine him trying to want to make it easy for Max Verstappen, knowing their history. But Perez at the moment, he's really stretching his legs now. He's half a second just over quicker than Perez in the first sector there, even in the middle sector, but now he's broken that DRS. Alonso 1.5 seconds behind now, with Russell a further afield as well, and 6.2 behind the leader. So yeah, it's Perez has really turned up the wick now.
Yeah, he's 6.2 behind Alonso, actually, George Russell, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
He's 8 seconds back from race leader Perez.
So, Fernando, the hard is not looking great so far, so we'll be looking at extending.
So Alonso being told the hard tyre's not looking great. So the drivers who have pitted, i.e. Sargent, Magnussen, Piastri, Bottas and Norris, who've gone onto the hard tyre, and with Lewis Hamilton complaining about the hard tyre, meaning that they don't necessarily want to do plan A, which could have been pit now and do the rest of the race on the hards. They maybe want to go a little longer and either have less time on the hard tyres or maybe go to the soft tyres.
Yeah, so they'll have loads of people keeping an eye on all different aspects of the race. They'll be tuning into team radio as well, but obviously keeping their eyes on those on the hard tyre, and it's not working at the moment. I mean, really isn't working. Temperature has dropped ever so slightly from the start of the race. So yeah, they'll be looking at plan B, C, etc. to see what's best, but they've got to factor in Alonso's penalty as well, so that will play into the strategy as well.
Well, crucially, him being 6 seconds ahead of George Russell now means that he's got a buffer to do the penalty and still be ahead.
Front right is our primary concern.
Sergio Perez being told the front right tyre is their primary concern. Hamilton's primary concern at the moment is Max Verstappen, who's right behind him, and Verstappen thinks about going for it even into the final corner there.
He knows who he's racing against.
Yeah.
I think if that was anyone else, I would have thought Max to send it down the inside, but he actually probably thought, do you know what, I don't want to risk anything like that today. So he picks up the DRS on the exit of the final corner, and Lewis, unfortunately, must be horrible for him, watches Max sail on past.
So Verstappen passed Hamilton up into 8th place. His next target will be Charles Leclerc, who's 2.3 seconds up the road. Yuki Tsunoda's moved up into 11th because Zhou Guanyu in the other Alfa Romeo has decided to pit as well. So both Alfa Romeos pitting pretty early to go onto the hard tyre. But Verstappen is up in 8th place now. Leclerc is 7th, and now within a second of the Alpine of Esteban Ocon ahead. The order is Perez leading, Alonso 2nd, Russell 3rd, Lance Stroll 4th, Carlos Sainz 5th, Ocon, Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton and Gasly, the top 10 at the moment. And Leclerc is right up behind Esteban Ocon now. As I say, less than a second between them as Leclerc makes some pretty decent progress. He's on the soft tyre, so he'll have more pace naturally than the cars around him in these early stages, but he's now only about 4 seconds off the back of his teammate Carlos Sainz, who's running in 5th. So it's a strong race so far from Leclerc, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's had the legs on his teammate all weekend, as the pit window for the softs is around about lap 13, which is now to lap 20, so we'll expect to keep an eye on him and maybe see him peel into the pits in the not too distant future. But yeah, he's got the run now on Esteban Ocon, opens up DRS, feels like a pretty decent gap, but I think he's going to sail on by Esteban Ocon, pulls to the left, and that was just out of hope more than anything, because the Ferrari sails through. Another easy move again for Charles Leclerc.
So Leclerc up into 6th place. Next target is his teammate Carlos Sainz. He's 4 seconds back from Sainz. The Ferrari pit crew just looking alert in the pit lane. They're not ready to go, but they're all on their feet, standing near the tyres. So we'll see which Ferrari will be coming in next. Perez leading, Alonso 2nd, Russell 3rd. We can go now to the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson. Andrew, what have you made of the opening 13 laps?
Well, just to pick you up on Charles Leclerc there, Jack, the talk going into the race, here's Alonso's radio.
The tyres feel good. We can keep going.
So Alonso, he was asked earlier on they're going to try and extend his first stint, and he seems quite happy with that. Leclerc?
Oh, serendipity, because I was just about to talk about tyres. Thank you, Fernando Alonso. The talk going into the race was that the soft tyre was a bit risky because it was going to grain. Now, that's where the surface of the rubber tears and it loses grip. Sometimes you can come out of that graining phase, it's something that the teams want to avoid. So everyone was expecting to do a medium and then a hard for the race. So it was a bit of a surprise to see Leclerc start on the soft, but as of now he has done, his pace is actually really good. He's quicker than, or he has been quicker than nearly everybody apart from Perez and Alonso and Verstappen. So the teams will be looking at that and thinking, well, we actually can make this soft tyre work. And it looks to me like a lot of people, and this is what Fernando Alonso was talking about with his engineer, as we were watching Verstappen's about to take the, what car is that? It's one of the Alpines. The Ocon's car that Leclerc just went past. He's just passed into turn 1. I think it looks to me like a lot of the teams, or at least the front-running teams, are going to try and go longer on the medium tyre and switch to the soft for the second part of the race.
Well, interestingly, Lance Stroll has just pitted from 4th place. Carlos Sainz was told to pit, and I wonder if Aston Martin have then tried to cover off that move from Sainz by pitting Stroll, and it means Stroll has emerged in 11th place on a set of hard tyres. So he's sort of doing the opposite. Not quite the opposite, but a different strategy to what his teammate Fernando Alonso looks to be doing out in 2nd place.
Yeah, or they've sent him out as a bit of sort of like a test dummy to see how the Aston gets on those hard tyres. As the sound you can hear is Max Verstappen, we're riding on board, sweeping left and right through this very high speed section. And yeah, I mean, he's up to 6th position now. He is a good 21 seconds off the lead, so he's got a little bit of a gap to close now, but yeah, he'll be still relaxed. He knows that there's a long way. We're sort of in safety car territory as well. It was around about lap 16 that we had Latifi crash into the wall last year, so there's still mistakes from drivers that can be made because it's not a forgiving circuit. There's not much runoff, so yeah, anything can still happen, and Max will be keeping over, and he's now charging down the Ferrari.
Lap 15 of 50 in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. That's W Series runner-up Alice Powell alongside me in commentary, and it is Sergio Perez who is leading the race at the moment. Fernando Alonso got a better start than Perez, took the lead, but Perez fought back and got up into the lead again. George Russell is running 3rd. Carlos Sainz is currently running 4th, with his teammate Charles Leclerc in 5th, going half a second a lap, also quicker, but he is on the soft tyre, so you'd expect him to pit sooner than Carlos Sainz. But Sainz is in a fight with Lance Stroll, who's down in 11th at the moment, but he already has pitted Lance Stroll, the first of the front runners that came into the pits, and he was in 4th place before the strategy started to kick into gear. The rest of the top 10, Verstappen is 6th, having come up from 15th on the grid. Ocon is 7th, Hamilton is 8th, Tsunoda is 9th, Stroll is 10th. And Verstappen now, lap 15 of 50, 20 seconds off the lead of the Grand Prix. Win could be tough from here.
It's doable though if you have a safety car.
Yeah.
You know, that's going to bunch everybody up, but it is tougher. We did expect, didn't we, say that lap 10 we expected him to sort of be at least in the top 5. He's still on the medium tyre. Leclerc now is slowing down. Previous lap time difference between the two, Leclerc was a good half a second slower than Max, so he is closing the gap. Again, we're getting a message flash up on the screen from Sainz's engineer saying box, but we've had that previous before, so
he does pit this time around though.
There, so he's not trying to bluff us this time. So into the pits goes Carlos Sainz, pulling into his garage, hoping for a smooth pit stop. We don't always see those from Ferrari, but this one so far seems pretty smooth on the hard tyre.
So let's see where Sainz comes out here, because this is an interesting move from Ferrari. They seem to sort of dummy Lance Stroll into pitting, and sort of avoiding the undercut was the attempt, and they've now tried to overcut him by staying out an extra lap, and it might just work here. Carlos Sainz coming around the first 2 corners, and he has emerged ahead of Lance Stroll. So Carlos Sainz has managed to get ahead of Lance Stroll up into a sort of net 4th position at the moment by staying out a lap longer, and that's a very nice move there from the Ferrari team and the Ferrari strategists. Maybe on this surface, the surface of the circuit, maybe it's a little bit difficult to get tyre temperature, and the undercut not quite as powerful.
Yeah, you know, it's hard. There's not many heavy braking zones at all on this circuit, so that way is one good way you would generate that tyre temperature is by using the brakes. Obviously, you're not going to do that in a race because using the brakes will slow you down. So they just need to feather their way through and build the temperature up that way. As now Max Verstappen really has closed the gap to Charles Leclerc. He's going to be having a look down into the final corner. Is he's thinking about it? No, again, he's held back a little bit like Lewis Hamilton. He wants the DRS. The detection point is on the exit of the corner. Easily picks up DRS as Charles Leclerc peels into the pits.
So Leclerc's coming into the pits now. We'll see where he emerges compared to Sainz and Stroll. Verstappen goes through and is now up into 4th position, but the top 4 are yet to pit. Perez, Alonso, Russell and Verstappen yet to pit. Charles Leclerc whacks on a new set of hard tyres and makes his way towards pit lane exit. Sergio Perez is pushing on this lap and is looking like he might set the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. Now heading down towards pit lane exit. It's going to be close here with Leclerc and Stroll, and Charles Leclerc is going to get ahead. So I'm not quite sure what's happened to Lance Stroll, but he's gone from a net 4th position ahead of both the Ferraris to now dropping behind both of the Ferraris. So Sainz, Leclerc, Stroll is the order in that battle. They're 7th, 8th, 9th at the moment. They'll get promoted up the order when other people pit, but very nicely done from Ferrari. And Aston Martin and Stroll really struggling at the start of this second stint for them.
So for once, I can say it, strategy has worked well for Ferrari so far. Maybe that's a new turn for them, but yeah, they've done a really good job there. So Sainz now in 7th, and we've got a yellow flag in sector 2. I said it was near the territory for safety car.
Stroll is dropping down the order.
Stroll has either made a mistake.
Lance, stop the car. Lance, stop the car, stop on track.
Stop the car, stop on track is the message to Lance Stroll. That could bring out a safety car, or at least a virtual safety car, but Stroll may be with an issue, and that's why he was lacking pace and dropped behind the 2 Ferraris. He stopped at turn 13 out there, has Stroll. Hamilton comes across the line and the safety car is deployed then. So safety car deployed, that'll bunch the whole pack up, and that is perfect news for Max Verstappen.
Yeah, perfect news, and for those that maybe haven't stopped as well, but yes, that is worrying for Aston Martin, because that was we need to stop the car now. You've got to make it a stop. So he has pulled into a safe position, so I'm actually surprised that they've released the safety car, because he has pulled. So all around the circuit there are orange stickers on the Armco barriers, and that is for the drivers to know that there is a safe place for them to pull in. So he's done the correct thing. he's pulled off into a safe position. So, yeah, surprised it's a safety car. Clearly, they want to bunch up the field.
I mean, I've not seen a car pull off in a safer position than that, to be honest, in all my days, to be honest. He hasn't quite managed to make it fully off the circuit, so they'd need to roll the car forward about 5 meters, and that would be enough. Now, is anyone going to pit this time around with the safety car out? I think it might be difficult because they would bunch the field up, but we'll keep an eye on Perez and Alonso. Russell has been told to pit, so we will see whether that works out for them. They're waiting in the pit lane, the Mercedes gang. So Perez, Alonso, Russell, Verstappen, Hamilton, the top 5 that are yet to pit. Perez is now being told to pit as well. Now, if the problem for Alonso is if he pits now, he'll have to serve that 5-second penalty, but Aston Martin are coming out and they are getting ready for him. So into the pits now comes Sergio Perez from the race lead to make his pit stop under safety car conditions. Off go the medium tyres, on go the hard tyres, and out pulls Perez. Verstappen is going to come into the pits as well. In now comes Fernando Alonso. But to be fair, he's got quite a big gap to George Russell, so this 5-second time penalty should see him retaining that second position. He's waiting now. 5 seconds will feel like an age, and then eventually the wheel guns fire into action. He hits the deck and heads back out on the circuit.
Did he actually lose any positions there? I don't think he lost any at all. No, so that's lucky for Alonso. Maybe that's what they were hanging on and waiting for, because everyone's got a delta to stick to when the safety car comes out, so they can't speed off. No one's at racing speed. They've all got to slow down. So for him, that's perfect, because he can take that penalty when everyone's at half racing speed. So, yeah, it's back to it. The field will be bunched up. I can't imagine that this safety car is going to be out for a long time, because, as you said, I'm surprised it wasn't a VSC, a virtual safety car, because he did pull off in a really good position. But there we go. It makes it more interesting for us, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, honestly, it barely needed a virtual safety car, to be honest. But there we go. We've got a full safety car. Sergio Perez is leading the Grand Prix, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. He's up behind the safety car after Lance Stroll has come to a stop. So Alonso is now second, Russell third, and Max Verstappen is now in 4th spot. So Verstappen has got him into 4th place because of the safety car. We're just getting a replay of what happened with Lance Stroll. He was driving along down towards turn 13. Nothing really seemed to
sound like he'd lost power.
Oh, there's smoke. I don't know if there's smoke coming from the back. I think it's just dirt.
Yeah, just sounded like he lost power. Or that could be the team saying, stop the car now. Let's see, nothing really flashing up on his steering wheel. Did a great job to pull it off the track and out of the way. And that's game over. As I said, Aston Martin will be slightly worried, you know, because they'll obviously dive into the data, find out what the issue is, but something similar could happen to Fernando Alonso, so they'll be a little bit cautious. He will obviously be aware that his teammate is now out of the race, and there might be a few steering wheel changes that need to be made by Fernando himself, but they're all pretty much now field bunched up behind the safety car.
So Perez leading, Alonso second, Russell third, Verstappen up into 4th place because of that safety car intervention. He's got ahead of Carlos Sainz. Hamilton is 6th. Hamilton has ended up splitting the Mercedes here thanks to that safety car, and he's on the medium tyre, so Hamilton has split the 2 Ferraris. Tsunoda is in 8th position on his hard tyres that he's been on, I think, for quite some time, Yuki Tsunoda. No, he just pitted, so he benefited from the safety car as well, Tsunoda. 9th and 10th now for the 2 Alpines of Ocon and Gasly. Magnussen 11th, Albon 12th, Hulkenberg 13th, 14th is De Vries, 15th is Sargent. Piastri, Joe, Norris and Bottas are the 19 drivers still in the Grand Prix. Lance Stroll is out of the race, the only driver out of the race. So, Max Verstappen, Alice Powell, now into 4th spot.
Yeah, and this has really benefited him, this safety car. Safety car will be ending on this lap as they're crossing the start-finish line into Perez now out of the turn 2. So for him, he needs to bunch the field up once the safety car lights go out and it whizzes off into the distance, as we see for Lando Norris into the pits to make another pit stop, changing to the medium tyre, and off he goes again. Just about nearly stalled it, but he got away. So for Perez now, it's a very, very long run down to turn 1 on the exit of the final corner. So I expect him to either go very late, that we've seen it in the past, or he needs to bunch them right up way before the final corner. The team will tell him, yep, safety car's now in the pits, and then he could put the hammer down and get a clean exit through the final corner. So a couple of options for the restart for Sergio. If I was him, I would just leave it last minute, let all carnage go behind, and then sort of floor it just before the green flag.
We're approaching half race distance here in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix on BBC Radio 5 Live. We're just getting a look at Charles Leclerc, who saw Lewis Hamilton emerge ahead of him after the pit stops.
And try to push from safety car line 1 for Hamilton. He just pitted.
Xavi, you need to tell me that before.
Copy.
No, but come on.
So what he's saying there is that the team should have told him, like, keep pushing fairly hard. There's a delta they have to stick to. Use all of that delta in that first sort of sector to try and make sure that Lewis didn't, pip him, which he ended up doing. And they literally told Leclerc as he was coming out of the turn 1, as now the safety car is driving off into the distance, and Sergio Perez has begun bringing the field even slower and bunching the pack up.
He hasn't left a huge amount of room, actually, to the safety car here, Sergio Perez, as he comes out of the final corner. So he'll have to give it a hot second before he does floor the throttle. And he is going to do the mess around down the start-finish straight. He's doing the Powell method, as is now going to be known. So Perez leading, the safety car about to come in, and the restart gets underway, and it's a really good restart from Perez. Pulls away from Fernando Alonso. Alonso not quite expecting it, and George Russell could be challenging Alonso for second position as they come down towards the first corner. Alonso covers the inside, sends it in really late on the brakes, but does manage to get it stopped. Fourth is Max Verstappen. The two Alpines are going wheel to wheel, coming through turns 2 and 3, and it is just about Esteban Ocon who remains ahead of his teammate Pierre Gasly. They're weaving around to defend from Kevin Magnussen, who's behind in 11th place. So great little fight going on there, but Sergio Perez has held the lead in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Fernando Alonso second, George Russell third. Max Verstappen from 15th on the grid has managed to get up into 4th place. He's not quite able to get through now, but he'll be challenging Russell, I imagine, by the time we get to the end of the lap. There's been a goal at Old Trafford, Lee Blakeman.
And it's been scored by Mitrovic. Manchester United 0, Fulham 1. Corner from the right, not dealt with after De Gea had made 2 big saves just before that. Mitrovic on hand to drill it in. His first ever goal in the FA Cup. 5 minutes gone in the second half. Manchester United 0, Fulham 1.
The winner plays Brighton in the FA Cup semi-final. 6:06 follows us here on 5 Live in a little under an hour's time. Lines are open, 08085 909 693 to speak to Robbie and Chris. But lap 21 of 50, approaching half race distance in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Sergio Perez is leading, and Max Verstappen is right behind George Russell now for the fight over 3rd position. They come out of the final corner at turn 27, start to head north up the seafront in Jeddah, and Max Verstappen is closing on the back of George Russell, but actually Hamilton is the one on a big attack. He's trying to pass Carlos Sainz coming down into the first corner in the Ferrari, and he can't quite do it there. Gets the drive back coming through out of turn 3, and he gets the cutback. Very nice move from Lewis Hamilton, and the Mercedes driver, the only driver on the medium tyres in the top 13, having gone for a different tyre strategy in this one, has made a very nice move on Carlos Sainz and is up into 5th place.
Yeah, he certainly has. As you said, he's on the medium tyre, so he will have more grip than those around him. So he's made Muse, so no DRS yet. I'm expecting that to be enabled on this coming lap as well. We're going to see a replay, so he's really putting Sainz under pressure. Goes left, goes right. Sainz has to squeeze him slightly, forces him to the outside. Lewis goes, OK, I'll let you run deep into turn 2, which he does, and on the grippier tyre gets the cutback. So a smart move there from Lewis Hamilton.
Sergio Perez is leading the Grand Prix. That's British racing driver Alice Powell alongside me, Jack Nicholls, in commentary here for the Grand Prix, and it is Perez in the lead, 2.7 seconds ahead of Alonso. Third is George Russell, and Max Verstappen is right with him again as they come towards the final corner at turn 27. Hamilton's closing in on the pair of them too. Verstappen looking to get up into the top 3. He's going to be very close on the run down the start. Finished straight this time, tucked right underneath the rear wing of George Russell. Russell holds the car in the centre of the circuit for the time being and has a good chunk of straight line speed here. So without DRS, Verstappen is not quite close enough to make the overtake on Russell. He's got to be a little bit patient here, Max Verstappen, before he can get him into third spot.
Yeah, so I was throwing my hands at the screen there as Lewis Hamilton is pushing his Mercedes to the absolute limit as he ran slightly wide on one of the exits there, so he can see his teammate in front, he can see Max, that they're stuck behind him, and George on the hard tyre, Lewis on the medium, so he knows this is his chance. But Perez, I mean, he is now a good 3.6 seconds, and I'm surprised with Fernando. His restart, he was almost a little bit half asleep, as we're going to hear from him.
Yeah, tyres, they feel very good. I like this tyre.
Copy, mate. Copy.
Okay, well, fair enough. I mean, he's struggling for pace at the moment compared to the guy in front of him, Perez. A good second, 9/10 to a second slower on that last lap. So pace deficit, yeah, but clearly maybe he's just trying to nurse them home. You know, he's getting them to the end as DRS is now enabled.
So Max Verstappen even closer to George Russell as they fling through the fast left-hander at turn 22. One of the most fearsome corners really on the Formula One calendar at the moment. And Verstappen is closing in again, coming towards the final corner at turn 27, and he goes to the inside and Verstappen goes through. Max Verstappen up into third place. Then his next target will be Fernando Alonso, who's less than a second ahead. So Verstappen will surely be up into the top two before too long, and Perez has put the hammer down here off the restart because he wants to win this Grand Prix, and he needs a big enough advantage to Verstappen behind in order for the team to, well, in order for Verstappen not to catch and pass him, but we'll get to that a little later. Ocon is fighting Yuki Tsunoda because Tsunoda briefly got ahead of the two Alpines. The AlphaTauri driver Tsunoda got up into 8th spot, Ocon and Gasly in 9th and 10th, so that fight is going on. But Perez is leading, Alonso second, Verstappen from 15th on the grid is now up into third place and closing in on Fernando Alonso in front as we will be at half race distance at the end of the next lap. Russell fourth, Hamilton fifth. The gap between them is down to 1.1 seconds. Hamilton took a couple of tenths out of Russell on that last lap. He's on the medium tyre that should be able to get to the end of the race, but he's trying to get ahead of George Russell. Sainz is 6th, Leclerc is 7th, Ocon is 8th, 9th is Tsunoda, 10th is Pierre Gasly. The rest of the runners, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Albon, Sargent, Joe, De Vries, Piastri, Norris and Bottas. Lap 24 of 50, here comes Alonso.
Yeah, so Max is right up behind him now. It's almost like there's like a message behind Alonso's message is he's going to have to defend, is he? No, well, Max thought about it, but Max is now going to have quite easily the DRS down the main straight, and that should be another easy move, breezing past the Aston Martin. But it's almost like Alonso has sort of conceded the fact that he knows the Red Bull is going to be up behind him. He's not even bothering defending down the straight, so he feels that maybe his battle is a bit further behind with the Mercedes, possibly, because George is still hanging in there and Lewis is charging down on the medium tyres. He is right up behind his teammate now.
Yeah, both Mercedes are looking pretty quick here in this stage of the Grand Prix. Gasly has now got ahead of Tsunoda, so Tsunoda drops down to 10th. But I think that is Alonso's feeling. If he starts fighting with Max Verstappen, he's going to get caught very quickly by the Mercedes, so he's trying to play the long game here and keep the fight on for third place, because Max Verstappen from 15th on the grid has now managed to make his way up into second. He's 5.5 seconds back from Sergio Perez, his Red Bull teammate, in the lead of this race, so it will be fascinating to see what happens over the remainder of this Grand Prix between those two Red Bull teammates. And I think this Alonso-Russell-Hamilton fight is really going to brew. Might even see some team orders at Mercedes, considering Hamilton appears to have the pace over Russell at the moment. They might let Hamilton through to try and attack Fernando Alonso over third place. A lot to unfold still.
Yeah, certainly there's still a long way left to go in this race. Tyres can still quite easily go off as Hamilton now has lost half a second on the live timing here. So yeah, Fernando is in DRS range still of Max Verstappen, but Max now, we're going to keep a close eye on these times. He was in traffic last lap, so he was a good second behind, but as I say that, he crosses the line and sets fastest lap by around about half a second.
Half a second quicker than his teammate Sergio Perez on that lap, Max Verstappen. Now, he did have DRS, so that will have given him a few more tenths of a second on the run down towards the first corner, but now that they are both in clear air, we will see what Verstappen can do. Alonso running in third spot. He still managed to stay within a second of Max Verstappen, but he has now just dropped out of that 1 second window. Russell is 2 seconds back from Alonso. Hamilton is 1 second back from Russell. Carlos Sainz is in sixth in the Ferrari on the hard tyre. He's 1.7 seconds back from the Mercedes. Leclerc is 1.2 seconds back from his teammate Carlos Sainz. Then it's the two Alpines of Ocon and Gasly in 8th and 9th. Yuki Tsunoda is 10th. Outside the top 10, which is the points-paying positions, you got Magnussen 11th, 12th for Hülkenberg, 13th Albon, 14th Sargent, 15th Joe, De Vries, Norris, Piastri and Bottas, the 19 drivers. Let's get an update from Old Trafford. Lee.
Still Manchester United 0, Fulham 1. United doing all they can to get back into this one. Anthony has come on to replace Scott McTominay. Bruno Fernandes has just shot wide from the edge of the area. Nearly an hour played. Manchester United 0, Fulham 1.
As it stands, Fulham would be facing Brighton in the semi-final of the FA Cup. The other draw made earlier today is Manchester City against Sheffield United. Alex Albon and Logan Sargent are having a fight over 13th place. Albon just 9th and 10th, so that fight is going on. But Perez is leading, Alonso second. Verstappen from 15th on the grid is now up into third place and closing in on Fernando Alonso in front, as we will be at half race distance at the end of the next lap. Russell 4th, Hamilton 5th. The gap between them is down to 1.1 seconds. Hamilton took a couple of tenths out of Russell on that last lap. He's on the medium tyre that should be able to get to the end of the race, but he's trying to get ahead of George Russell. Sainz is 6th, Leclerc is 7th, Ocon is 8th, 9th is Tsunoda, 10th is Pierre Gasly. The rest of the runners, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Albon, Sargent, Joe, De Vries, Piastri, Norris and Bottas. Lap 24 of 50. Here comes Alonso.
Yeah, so Max is right up behind him now. It's almost like there's like a message behind Alonso's message, is he's going to have to defend. Is he? No. Well, Max thought about it, but Max is now going to have quite easily the DRS down the main straight, and that should be another easy move, breezing past the Aston Martin. But it's almost like Alonso has sort of conceded the fact that he knows the Red Bull is going to be up behind him. He's not even bothering defending down this straight, so he feels that maybe his battle is a bit further behind with the Mercedes, possibly, because George is still hanging in there and Lewis is charging down on the medium tyres. He is right up behind his teammate now.
Yeah, both Mercedes are looking pretty quick here in this stage of the Grand Prix. Gasly has now got ahead of Tsunoda, so Tsunoda drops down to 10th. But I think that is Alonso's feeling. If he starts fighting with Max Verstappen, he's going to get caught very quickly by the Mercedes, so he's trying to play the long game here and keep the fight on for third place, because Max Verstappen from 15th on the grid has now managed to make his way up into second. He's 5.5 seconds back from Sergio Perez, his Red Bull teammate, in the lead of this race. So it will be fascinating to see what happens over the remainder of this Grand Prix between those two Red Bull teammates. And I think this Alonso-Russell-Hamilton fight is really going to brew. Might even see some team orders at Mercedes, considering Hamilton appears to have the pace over Russell at the moment. They might let Hamilton through to try and attack Fernando Alonso over third place. A lot to unfold still.
Yeah, certainly there's still a long way left to go in this race. Tyres can still quite easily go off as Hamilton now has lost half a second on the live timing here. So yeah, Fernando is in DRS range still of Max Verstappen, but Max now, we're going to keep a close eye on these times. He was in traffic last lap, so he was a good second behind, but as I say that, he crosses the line and sets fastest lap by around about half a second.
Half a second quicker than his teammate Sergio Perez on that lap, Max Verstappen. Now, he did have DRS, so that will have given him a few more tenths of a second on the run down towards the first corner, but now that they are both in clear air, we will see what Verstappen can do. Alonso running in third spot. He still managed to stay within a second of Max Verstappen, but he has now just dropped out of that 1 second window. Russell is 2 seconds back from Alonso. Hamilton is 1 second back from Russell. Carlos Sainz is in 6th in the Ferrari on the hard tyre. He's 1.7 seconds back from the Mercedes. Leclerc is 1.2 seconds back from his teammate Carlos Sainz. Then it's the two Alpines of Ocon and Gasly in 8th and 9th. Yuki Tsunoda is 10th. Outside the top 10, which is the points-paying positions, you got Magnussen 11th, 12th for Hülkenberg, 13th Albon, 14th Sargent, 15th Zhou, De Vries, Norris, Piastri and Bottas, the 19 drivers. Let's get an update from Old Trafford. Lee.
Still Manchester United 0, Fulham 1. United doing all they can to get back into this one. Anthony has come on to replace Scott McTominay. Bruno Fernandes has just shot wide from the edge of the area. Nearly an hour played. Manchester United 0, Fulham 1.
As it stands, Fulham would be facing Brighton in the semi-final of the FA Cup. The other draw made earlier today is Manchester City against Sheffield United. Alex Albon and Logan Sargent are having a fight over 13th place. Albon just ran very wide coming through turn 22, and Sargent is getting ahead of him. Sargent's on the medium tyre. They pitted around about the same time, Sargent and Albon, but Sargent is on the mediums and has a bit more pace compared to Albon right now, and Albon has just been passed by Zhou as well, and might soon get passed by the Dutchman Nick De Vries.
Yes, he surely has an issue. He's slowing down the main straight. It looked like he almost pulled over to let his teammate pass, but then Zhou went past as well, so must be an issue. He's dropped pretty much right to the back of the field now, so not a good start for the season for Alex Albon in this race. As we can hear, there's warning lights on his steering wheel, almost a little bit of a misfire there, as that's the sound you can hear. The Williams, as the team in the garage now put their helmets on, walk out into the pit lane, and I am expecting Alex Albon to drag his car, limp home, bring it back, and he'll be pushed back into the garage.
It's Alice Powell alongside me for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen are both pushing up at the front of the field, both trying to do the best lap they can to basically fight over the win. I think that's what we're seeing unfold, and on that last lap, Perez pretty much matched Max Verstappen's pace, so that's going to be an interesting one. Alex Albon in the Williams scored a point in the opening race of the season, managing to finish in 10th spot, but no points for him here, most likely retiring at the end of this lap. The sound you can hear is Lewis Hamilton, who's in the DRS range of his teammate George Russell. Now, traditionally, Mercedes have let their drivers fight, and that looks like what's unfolding here, because although they're on different sort of tyre strategies, they don't have to pit again in the course of the Grand Prix. So it's not a case of let Hamilton go and it'll come back to you later in the race. It's if you want to finish fourth, you've got to have a fight.
I am expecting to hear a Lewis radio message though, saying, come on guys, you know, I'm faster, I can get P3. We're wasting time here, so we'll keep an eye on that, because again, we're riding on board. That's the sound you can hear of Lewis feathering it through the fastest section of the circuit, as now flashing up on the timing screens as Max Verstappen fastest lap, but Perez has pretty much matched him. So now Perez has really turned up, maybe stopped nursing his tyres and realised, right, okay, great, I've got Max behind me now. This is the last person I wanted to see. So Red Bull's swapping fastest laps as well at the moment.
Yeah, 600ths quicker on that last lap was Max Verstappen compared to Sergio Perez, and the gap is 5.1 seconds. Tell you what, Perez wins this Grand Prix from here, it'll be his best ever Grand Prix win by no doubt to my mind, but we have still got 23 laps to go. Or there is no doubt in my mind, should I say. Is that better terminology, as my producer slams me for my order of words in my ears? Sergio Perez then leading Max Verstappen in second place, and into the pits to retire comes Alex Albon in the Williams. Across the line they come again. Now that last lap, it was just over a tenth of a second that Verstappen took out of Sergio Perez, so the gap comes down to 4.9 seconds between the two Red Bulls up at the front. Alonso doing a personal best as well, pretty much matching the lap time set by George Russell. Here's Russell's radio.
Alonso with a 5-second penalty here. Let's fight later, but let's manage to try it a little bit now.
Alonso served his penalty at the stop.
Again, in for a lead.
So George Russell then trying to be a little bit cute, trying to be a little bit clever with the team, saying, look, Alonso's got a 5-second time penalty. Let's not fight the two of us and then lose out to Alonso. The team reminding him Alonso served his penalty. And so that scuppers Russell's clever little plan that he thought of.
Yeah, I think there was a hidden message behind that. So, you know, he's just covering himself, saying, well, if you're going to expect me to let Lewis pass, here, you know, let's think long term. But yeah, that scuppered his plans when he was told that Alonso served his penalty now, as Max Verstappen, purple in the middle sector, but Perez is nearly matching it. So a good job from Sergio, who's managing it well, but we know Max always ends up stepping it up, just seems to manage the tyres a little bit better than Perez. So we've still got, you know, a distance to go in this race, so we'll keep an eye on that. But Alonso as well, he's sitting there, and he seems, again, still pretty happy as Max Verstappen, again, a tenth quicker than Perez on that last lap, and another fastest lap.
Is he biding his time, Verstappen?
I think he is. You know, he's good at managing his tyres. You obviously don't need a great deal of management. It's not necessarily a high deg circuit here on the hard tyre, as Sargent now has DRS and down attacking one of the Hasses into turn one, pulls over to defenders. Hulkenberg, no room there, closes the door. He runs a little bit deep actually, so on the medium tyre, Sargent pulls to the right hand side of the circuit, a drag race down into the next corner, and just not enough room there. So a nice battle, bring on a lot further down the field.
Fighting over 12th place, Nico Hulkenberg and Logan Sargent at differing ends of their Formula One careers. Hulkenberg sort of slightly surprised to still have one after leaving the sport for a couple of years, but being drafted back in at Haas, while Logan Sargent making only his second Formula One start, and he's now coming under pressure from Zhou Guanyu, who's running in 14th position. Perez and Verstappen fighting it out in front, just 5 seconds between them. Fernando Alonso's in third, 2 seconds ahead of George Russell, who's 1.4 seconds ahead of Lewis Hamilton. So Hamilton's attack on Russell has waned a little. Ferraris don't have much pace. They're going half a lap slower than the two Mercedes in front, so they are now 3.3 seconds back from the Mercedes in what is turning into a fairly unpleasant afternoon for Ferrari. Ocon and Gasly in 8th and 9th. Well, the cars haven't broken down yet, so that is some...
That's one positive, isn't it?
Exactly. Yuki Tsunoda completing the top 10 at the moment for the Alfa Romeo for the Alfa Tauri team. And Sargent is going to be attacking again on the run down towards the first corner. Lando Norris is right on the back of Nick de Vries as they fight over 15th position. I don't know, there's a bit of me that doesn't maybe think Verstappen's biding his time here, because why would he? Have a think about that answer, Alice Powell, while we go to Old Trafford.
Fulham should be 2 ahead, still Manchester United 0, Fulham 1. Pereira's just swung in a lovely free kick. Mitrovic met it with his head. De Gea at full stretch, diving to his right to keep Manchester United in this FA Cup quarter-final. Manchester United 0, Fulham 1 with 24 minutes to play.
Thank you very much, Lee. Sergio Perez is leading the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. Max Verstappen is in second, but he keeps doing personal best laps of the race, as does Sergio Perez. I don't know, there's no evidence yet to suggest that Verstappen is just chilling out as he sets personal best after personal best.
Yeah, he's just gone purple sector 1, purple sector 2, so that will close the gap down a little bit to Perez, but there's still 29 laps left of the Grand Prix, so there's still a lot, 19 laps left, and my maths is terrible today, of the Grand Prix. But Sergio Perez responds in the last sector, setting purple there. Max Verstappen, though, does go a little bit quicker now, as they really have turned it, so they've both gained a good chunk of time here. So Perez will have it on his pit board, the distance of the car behind, which is obviously Max. So they'll be aware, he'll be aware of the distance. The team will be keeping him informed. But I'm just going on past history. You know, Max, we think, oh no, maybe not. Maybe he's used it all. There's another purple in the first sector. So I'm just going by past history, Jack. You know, to see that Max suddenly comes from nowhere. We think that he's giving it all, and then all of a sudden he gives us a little bit more.
Using all your years of experience as a racing driver, whereas I'm just being like, nah, it looks about the same.
You're probably going to end up being right.
No, I don't know.
Perez is going to be winning this at the end, but we'll see. But every time Max sets a good sector, a good lap, we see Perez respond. So, you know, they're going to be even if you're going by the sectors at the moment, as we're still seeing a battle brewing down for 11th, 12th and 13th on track. Sargent really not giving up as Alex Albon wanders down the pit lane looking very disappointed. And a replay as well of Leclerc coming down into turn 1, hunting down his teammate, a small lock-up. Luckily there's no gravel or barren for him on the exit there. Runs wide off track. I mean, that is frustrating for Ferrari. They must be sat there on the pit wall at the moment just thinking, how are we in these positions now?
Alex Brundle could only dream of retiring from a Formula 1 race.
I don't know why I had Alex Brundle on my brain, but clearly I do. There we go, I have to say, hey, here. Clearly got you on the brain during the commentary.
Yeah, former GP3 racer, Alex Brundle, and now races a bit in sports cars. Not sure what he's doing this season, to be honest with you, but anyway, lap 33 of 50. Sergio Perez is leading the Grand Prix ahead of Max Verstappen. He was actually on BBC Radio Norfolk's Racing Talk show this week, Alex Brundle, hosted by
I should tout him. He's going to have to give me some money for this now.
Yeah, exactly. We've never hired him for co-coms on 5 Live. Sergio Perez is leading this race, 4.8 seconds. He's a lovely boy. I'm a big fan of Alex Brundle. Nice man. Right, the gap's coming down a little now. It's been 5 seconds basically ever since Verstappen got up into second place. I mean, I say it's coming down. It's come down to 4.8 seconds over the course of the last 10 laps or so. Here's Charles Leclerc's radio.
Yeah, we highlight the issues with cars not working. Understood.
Leclerc saying being behind like this is really rubbish. I don't know what to do. I don't know if he's talking about Sainz specifically or just the general Ferraris being behind the Mercedes, which is honestly a bit of a surprise at the moment, but that is the situation. Sainz and Leclerc, they've just got nothing. Ferrari, nothing.
No, I mean, again, we touched on it yesterday with Leclerc. You know, he is expecting to be higher up than he is. Clearly frustration on his radio message there, and there was previous in the race frustration again where the team weren't letting him know where Lewis was on track under the safety car. So how long does he put up with this? You know, he clearly feels that he should be much further on, and Ferrari say, yeah, we've sorted this, we've employed someone else, we've made some changes. At the moment, it's not working for them. I know it's early days in the season. Usually they start the season strong. If you look at, especially last season, he had a great battle with Max Verstappen here last year, but at the moment it's just not working for them, and he feels that he's not a 7th place driver, he's a winner.
Perez leading the Grand Prix. Max Verstappen in second position. On this lap so far, they are pretty much even. In fact, Perez is going a little bit quicker on this lap than Max Verstappen is. So I think this is, I don't know, I'm starting to be sold that we've got a really quite fun fight on for the win between the two Red Bull drivers, Perez and Verstappen. Fernando Alonso is running in third. He's still managing to keep the gap at a little over 2 seconds to George Russell in 4th position in the Mercedes. Hamilton is 5th. He's dropped 2.5 seconds back from Russell, so maybe just looking after his tyres before for the end of the Grand Prix. Sainz and Leclerc 6th and 7th in the 2 Ferraris. Ocon and Gasly 8th and 9th in the 2 Alpines. Tsunoda's in 10th. Magnussen is in 11th place, but that's a very tight one coming into the final corner. Kevin Magnussen had a little look coming into that hairpin left-hander of turn 27. He's now got the slipstream and the drag reduction system on Yuki Tsunoda. They're fighting over the final points-paying position, and he's not quite close enough this time through, Kevin Magnussen, and in fact outbrakes himself, goes way too deep into the first 2 corners. That'll cost him maybe a second or so, and he'll have to build it all up again to catch the back of Yuki Tsunoda. So yeah, it cost him about a second, Kevin Magnussen. as he drops back from that fight. Logan Sargent is still trying to get ahead of Nico Hulkenberg in the fight of 12th place. Let's head to Old Trafford. Lee Blakeman.
It's all kicking off here, Jack. Manchester United have got a penalty and Fulham have had Alexander Mitrovic sent off. Jadon Sancho rounded the goalkeeper, put in his shot. It was blocked by Willian on the line. With his hand, the referee Chris Kavanagh was called over to the screen. As he was checking VAR on the screen, Marco Silva, the Fulham manager, shouted something. Straight red card for him. Alexander Mitrovic has then squared up to referee Chris Kavanagh. He's been shown a red card, and for the handball, Willian has been sent off as well. So at the moment, walking towards the tunnel at Old Trafford are Marco Silva, Alexander Mitrovic and Willian, who's got tears in his eyes. Fulham still lead 1-0. Manchester United with a penalty in front of the Stretford end. It is going to take a while because there's been a massive melee around referee Chris Kavanagh. Come back to me. Fulham down to 9. They lead 1-0. United with a penalty.
Oh, we'll be back, Lee. That sounds absurd. So, wow, goodness me. Sergio Perez leading the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Meanwhile, we'll let you know when that penalty is being taken at Old Trafford. But two players and a manager sent off for Fulham in the FA Cup semi-final. They're leading 1-0 and trying to face Brighton in the quarter-final. They're trying to face Brighton in the semi-final. Perez is leading the Grand Prix here. The gap has come down to 4.5 seconds between Perez and Verstappen. So the Dutchman, the two-time champion, the reigning champion, is just starting to chip away at the advantage Perez has. It's just 15 laps to go, though. It's still a long way.
There's still time. There's still time for an incident as well. As we saw a replay whilst we were at the football of Hulkenberg just kissing the wall into turn 1. Lack of concentration, maybe looking in his mirrors rather than looking forward.
Right, let's go back to Old Trafford. Penalty time, Lee.
Fernandez has put the ball on the spot in front of the Stretford end. Fulham leading Manchester United 1-0. Fulham down to 9. Big moment in this FA Cup quarter-final. Bruno Fernandes with a very slow run up he steps and sends the keeper the wrong way. And we've got a game on now at Old Trafford. Fernandez's penalty makes it Manchester United 1, Fulham 1.
Well, don't forget 6:06 following the Grand Prix here in about 13 laps time, so half an hour or so. Get your calls in for Robbie and Chris. 08085 909 693. Plenty to chat about there, and there's still 15 minutes to go at Old Trafford, plus I imagine a decent chunk of stoppage time, so we'll keep you up to date with everything going on in Manchester. But in Saudi Arabia, it is Sergio Perez who is leading the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in Jeddah, and Max Verstappen is in second. He started 15th on the grid. He climbed his way up the order. We kind of thought maybe it would be a foregone conclusion that he would win this race, but he's still 4.5 seconds back from Perez.
I feel like the Mansell's just running a bit back.
It's just the B-bell offset that's left Max. Can't do anything on the B-bell map itself.
I mean, I'm saying the drive shaft.
Okay, stand by.
So Max Verstappen saying on the radio the drive shaft feels a bit dodgy. Now the drive shaft failed yesterday, which is why he ended up not completing qualifying and starting down in 15th. The team then, his engineer GP coming on the radio saying, oh, that's just the brake balance. He's saying, no, I'm talking about the drive shaft. What are you talking about? So they're having a look into it. Bit of a weird conversation, that.
Yeah, it is. Clearly he can feel something, as we're just seeing Perez, a replay, Perez running wide at 22, and then Max deciding he wanted to follow as well.
And there's another goal at Old Trafford, Lee.
Manchester United ahead. Luke Shaw with the ball in from the left. Sabitzer back to goal with the flick. Brilliant finish past Leno, and this place has gone absolutely wild. Manchester United coming from behind to lead Fulham by 2-1.
Wow, what a turnaround. Fulham down to 9 men and now losing 2-1 in the space of about 5 minutes or something. Remarkable turnaround at Old Trafford, and they, Manchester United, are now looking set to face Brighton in the FA Cup semi-final, but still plenty of time to go. Lap 38 to 50. Here's Verstappen's radio.
It makes like a weird noise at high speed.
Okay, understood, Max. We are monitoring. I'll let you know. We are happy at the moment, Max.
There's something wrong.
Max Verstappen.
Stand by. Keep going for the moment.
Convinced there's something wrong with his Red Bull car. He's running in second place and he's just dropped a decent chunk of time on that last lap. He goes 1 second slower than Sergio Perez last time through. Perez leading the Grand Prix, but 1 second a lap quicker than Max Verstappen, who's complaining of a problem with his Red Bull car. Fernando Alonso in third position in the Aston Martin. George Russell and Lewis Hamilton are fourth and fifth, and Manchester United are leading Fulham by 2-1 in the FA Cup quarter-final at Old Trafford. We are on board with Verstappen, just sort of trying to listen and see if anything sounds particularly weird. Nothing remarkable, Alice Powell.
No, he'll hear more than we can from sitting in that cockpit, but it will affect the drivability as well. So maybe the drop in pace for Max could either be, lack of concentration, get distracted by the noise, or there genuinely is a problem, and he's feeling the handling difference as well, the drive shaft through these corners here. So yeah, it's pace has certainly dropped on that last lap, not by a small margin either.
Well, and then the first sector of this lap, he got that half a second back, went half a second quicker than Perez in the first third.
He's got to just be distracted then by it, surely. He's too busy on the radio worrying about the issue, a small lack of concentration, and that can happen. That's where you can lose these tenths of a second, and with Perez pushing as well to the absolute maximum.
Max, any more feedback on that issue from before?
Well, yeah, it's still there.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah, mate, it's definitely still there. It's not just disappeared. So, but Max has upped the pace back again. He's purple in that last sector. So, yeah, he's clearly thinking, or got his concentration back to where it needs to be now.
So, leading the Grand Prix is Sergio Perez. He's 4.5 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen. Fernando Alonso is third quickest, Russell fourth, Hamilton fifth, Sainz, Leclerc, Ocon, Gasly and Tsunoda the rest of the top 10. So on that last lap, so Verstappen, after losing a second, then found 7/10 of a second back on the next lap. Here's Perez radio.
I'm having a bit of a long pedal. Brake pedal.
So he's having a bit of a long brake pedal. What does he mean by that?
So basically his foot's just going more or less to the floor, so that's not ideal when you want to slam on the brakes going into turn one and into the final corner as well, and that can just really upset your rhythm. You'll end up braking earlier because you just don't necessarily trust the car, and if you have a long brake pedal, that can either mean, well, there's definitely an issue with the brakes, and if a long brake pedal, that is a concern for the team for sure, because the last thing you want to do is lose the brakes here and send on into the barrier. There's not much runoff into turn one.
The gap now has come down to 4.3 seconds. Sergio Perez comes out of the final corner across the line. There's now 10 laps to go in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in Jeddah. And Perez is leading this race, as he has from pole position, but his teammate Max Verstappen is starting to turn the wick up a little here, and the gap comes down to 4.3 seconds. Here's Sergio Perez's radio.
Quite happy with the brake pedal, just a little bit of wear.
Perez, his engineer, telling him pedal's all right, it's just wearing out a little bit. Alonso is third in the Aston Martin, now 5 seconds ahead of George Russell in fourth position, so they look to have the measure of the Mercedes at the moment. Hamilton is fifth, Sainz and Leclerc are sixth and seventh, Ocon, Gasly, Tsunoda are the top 10. So in about 20 minutes time or so, we'll be heading to Robbie and Chris on 606. You can get your calls in, lines are open, 08085 909 693. Manchester United leading 9-man Fulham by 2-1. Let's get an update there from Lee Blakeman.
The chances just keep on coming now for Manchester United. As you say, Jack, Fulham down to 9. Willian sent off for handball. Mitrovic gone for dissent. Marco Silva, the Fulham boss, has gone for dissent. United, every time they get the ball on their left wing, look like scoring. 9 to play. Manchester United 2, Fulham 1.
Max Verstappen is chasing down Sergio Perez in the lead of the Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia, but the gap is again kind of staying steady at 4.3 seconds at the moment. Verstappen lost all that time, then he gained that time. You think he's turning the wick up, but then it starts to settle down again. 9 laps to go as Perez comes across the line. 4 seconds in 9 laps. Verstappen's got to be doing half a second a lap, and I don't think he is.
No, I mean, the inconsistency seems to come. Yeah, inconsistency seems to come in that first sector. So one moment Perez is a couple of tenths quicker, then Verstappen's a couple of tenths quicker. So obviously struggling to get something right or get the consistency in that first sector, which is probably the trickiest part of the circuit, which will explain it. But Max Verstappen's just gone purple in the last sector, but the gap still remains at 4.3 seconds, so time is quickly running out for Max Verstappen, as Norris now right up on the back of Nick de Vries. He's dragging along Oscar Piastri as well, as Zach Brown looks on the pit wall. A really disappointing weekend for McLaren, which actually started off with a lot of potential if you're looking at free practice session, but that error from Lando Norris, where he broke his car. We see a lunge into the last corner. Oh, a very aggressive lunge, and that is absolutely going to screw the Williams down the straight, as de Vries sent one in. And Lando Norris now has DRS as a drag race into turn 1.
So de Vries lunged it in on Logan Sargent into the final corner, and then Sargent under pressure from the Norris behind. Piastri's behind him as well. They're all fighting like their lives depend on it over 14th position. Nick de Vries, here's Perez's radio out in the lead.
Okay, target 32.6 plus 0.4. Is Max doing the same? Max's last lap 32.6. I mean, so why you tell me 33.0? This target plus 0.4, jobs are good. We are pushing without a reason, guys, but have to do.
So basically do 32.2, which is what he did last lap, but Max has pretty much matched him as well. So Max obviously is dialed into Perez's radio as well and either received the same message. They're both doing identical lap times now, and I think, I don't want to commentate his curse here, but Perez is looking pretty decent now for the win.
Yeah, Sergio Perez holding on ahead of Max Verstappen. Well, I say holding on, he's still got that just over a 4-second advantage. Alonso running in third in the Aston Martin, Russell fourth, Hamilton fifth, Sainz, Leclerc, Ocon, Gasly and Tsunoda the top 10. Lando Norris, meanwhile, in the McLaren, has had a big run over the curbs on the exit of turn 10 as he tries to get ahead of Logan Sargent in the fight over 15th place. I was just mentioning Nick de Vries, the Dutchman who had a one-off race last year for Williams, was very impressive, but has struggled a little maybe in the first couple of races of this year, so it's good for him to be up into 14th. His teammate Yuki Tsunoda's running in the points at the moment in 10th position, just a second ahead of Kevin Magnussen, but good for de Vries to get his elbows out, something he's very, I was going to say good at, but very adept at, certainly. He's famous for getting his elbows out.
Guys, we don't really need this. So we're pushing now. You're free to push. Free to push.
So Sergio Perez is a little bit annoyed that he's having to push, I think, in this Grand Prix. He's saying, why are we pushing? The team is saying, yeah, you're free to push, but I think he feels like they should be holding station currently.
Well, you never know with Max.
Yeah.
You never know. Suddenly he could whack it up and be right on the back of you. So that's possibly what Perez's side are just covering, because you never know. But the gap is, say, pretty stable. It's around 4.3 to 4.5. It stayed within that region. But Sargent now, he's the one that's really under pressure from two charging McLarens who've had a disappointing weekend, as Piastri takes a little bit of a wide line going through 22, but he's sticking on the back there of his teammate. Sargent under pressure now from the McLarens.
That 44 of 50. Sergio Perez leading the way, just over 4 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen still. Well, it's almost 5 seconds now, but here comes Lando Norris in the McLaren on the back of Logan Sargent, the British driver trying to pass the American, run down towards the first corner. Sargent looking at his left wing mirror, and as a result covers the inside, but the McLaren's got no straight line speed. Norris has got the slipstream and the drag reduction system, the flap in the rear wing open. He can't get anywhere near him.
No, he can't. That is disappointing from the McLarens. Lando again, how long does he stay there with McLaren? You know, he again, a little bit like Leclerc, feels that he should be much further up than where he is. So how long does he sit there? As we hear from Bottas.
Can you see any damage in the car?
So far, no feedback. Stand by.
Something is not right. Copy. Sliding everywhere.
The man in last position says something's not right with his car. I don't think we need to spend too much time discussing that.
No, I mean, that's a big dent of your confidence. Last thing you want is something unexpected going on this circuit. But again, Lando, how long does he stay there at McLaren? You know, he is a guy in demand. There'll be Red Bull that will be looking at him as a possible replacement for Perez, possibly. Mercedes maybe with Lewis, even though Toto feels pretty confident that Lewis is going to be staying around. So yeah, McLaren need to step it up, I feel, if they want to keep Lando.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens there. 6:06 following us here on 5 Live. You can get your calls into Robbie and Chris, 08085 909 693. We should have all of the FA Cup semi-final draws completed by then. What's going on at Old Trafford, Lee?
Manchester United still leading 9-man Fulham by 2-1. Come close to making it third a few moments ago, though. Anthony has shot straight at the Fulham goalkeeper, Bernd Leno. Fulham getting ready to make a quadruple change, which is nearly half of their side. I'll put my teeth in. Manchester United 2, Fulham 1.
Wow. 5 laps to go in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Having a very interesting fight with McLaren. Alice Powell, who's alongside me, was just talking about Lando Norris and keeping him happy at the McLaren team. I wonder if he's got an issue or something, because he's got no straight line speed, and his teammate Oscar Piastri is having a fight with him now and has got ahead of him coming over the line last time through. Fun fight between those two. They're fighting over 16th and 17th, so it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of the race result, but it's been a head-to-head we've been fascinated to see. Norris, one of the kind of biggest talents in Formula One, and Oscar Piastri, one of the biggest new talents to come into Formula One in just his second race. Here's Verstappen's radio.
What's the fastest lap?
We are not concerned about that at the moment, Max.
Yeah, but I am.
So Max Verstappen wants to try and get a point for fastest lap to then lead the championship, basically, because at the moment he and Perez, his teammate, would be level on points at the top of the standings. There's a great fight going on here between Tsunoda and Magnussen for the final points paying position. Magnussen sends it in fully locked up into the first corner, and he gets up into 10th place. They've been squabbling for quite a few laps now, and Magnussen finally has made the move on Yuki Tsunoda and gets up into that 10th spot. Lovely stuff from the Haas man.
Yeah, we saw a camera view of them all charging into that first corner, locked up, smoke billowing, but Magnussen's made the jump. A great move.
That's Tsunoda's reaction.
We didn't even need to say who it was with that sort of reaction. Yuki clearly not happy. He knows that's him out of the points now. But yeah, Magnussen's got strong pace, because already he's pulled a good 1.3 second gap on Yuki Tsunoda. But one person that will be breathing a sigh of relief will be Sargent now. But it's actually saying that Lando's crept onto the back of him. He's back in front of his teammate Oscar Piastri. And yeah, Max, he's desperate for that fastest lap, but the team, let's see if he listens to the team. Let's see if he listens and takes the team's order to say, right, let's not risk anything. It's early on, there's still a long way left to go. Mistakes can easily happen at this circuit, but at the moment he's sitting P2 in the standings, and as you said, Jack, that fastest lap will put him P1.
7 minutes of added time at Old Trafford. They've just started. Max Verstappen is 6 seconds back now from Sergio Perez. So Perez looking highly likely to take the win. And actually, he's got the fastest lap of the race at the moment. So he would take the lead of the Formula One World Championship. Sergio Perez just 1 point ahead of Max Verstappen. And he's had really, really strong pace today, Perez. I've been very impressed, to be honest with you, because it looked as though it was a no-brainer that Verstappen would close in and pass, but Perez has been great.
Yeah, no, he has. You know, we all sat here sort of expecting Verstappen when we saw him pop into P2 and clear Fernando quite easily, that here we go, we're going to have a scrap in about 5-6 laps time between these two Red Bulls, and Max will sail and pass. But no, and I think I agree with you, Jack, when you said that if Perez holds on to this, as we hear from Russell.
So there could be a possible 5-second penalty for Alonso end of the race. Gap 4.5.
Okay, so I have no idea what that would be for, but going back to Perez, I think this would be, agreeing with you, that's probably his best win, because he's, okay, you could say, well, you know, he's had some help from Verstappen starting way down in 15th place, but he's kept there. He's had fastest lap. You know, he's kept up the pace, and he's done a great job of managing his tyres.
Lap 48 of 50, Perez is leading 6.5 seconds ahead of Verstappen. Alonso in third. Just one, I might have to get the regulations out here. I just wonder if you're not allowed to serve your 5-second time penalty under the safety car or something like that, but I don't think that's true. But we'll get the regs out and have a little look. Perez leading, Verstappen second. We'll have all the reaction to this Grand Prix. As I say, we'll be heading to 6:06 fairly swiftly after the end, but we'll have all the reaction available to download later on the Checker Flag podcast, which will be up later tonight. And at 8 o'clock tonight on 5 Live, you can listen to the Rugby Union Daily, which will have all the reactions to the Six Nations from over the weekend and over the last few weeks. Meanwhile, Sergio Perez comes across the line to start the penultimate lap of the Grand Prix, 6.6 seconds ahead of Verstappen. So 2 tours to go for Perez before he takes his 5th Formula One World Championship victory. And what an impressive one it would be. He's had some good wins, Perez, there's no doubt about that. His first Grand Prix win was in a racing point a few years ago in Bahrain, but that was kind of, you know, circumstantial. People raved about his drive last year to winning in Singapore, but even then Verstappen wasn't really in the fight. This is the first time he's kind of fully taken on Verstappen. The gap between them was 5 seconds, and he's beaten him.
Russell is 4.3 behind. It'd be nice to have 5 seconds in just in case, but we think we're all clean.
So I wonder
that was Alonso's radio.
Yeah, I wonder if it could be, we saw Esteban where the team touched the car too early, and I did notice, but didn't think anything of it at the time. The rear jack man sort of went to put the jack underneath. He
was lurking, wasn't he?
He was lurking. So whether they're saying, oh, you made contact and that's out of it. So Fernando now on the timing has stretched that to 4.9 seconds, but George will be aware that we can, as we've heard on the radio already from him, is aware of the possible time penalty. So maybe there's that, Jack, as we're now on to the final lap.
One more lap to go for Sergio Perez, down towards turn 1 into the 90-degree left-hander, then he swings it right through the next corner at turn 2. The Mexican on his final lap.
Is he getting a penalty or not? I'm pushing like a madman at the moment.
Just keep pushing like a madman.
That's George Russell saying, was he getting a penalty? Like, I'm pushing like mad. And the team say, well, just do it. Push like mad for one more lap, George, and then you never know. But the gap is just about 5 seconds right now between the two of them. Alonso and Aston Martin, for whatever the sort of suggested issue is, they think they are in the clear. Perez is in the clear in the Red Bull. He's going to take the lead of the Formula One World Championship here. He drove away at the start with great pace. He did a smart little restart as well. Verstappen has just done the fastest first sector of the race so far, so he wants to finish off with the fastest lap and the championship lead. So we'll keep an eye on him as he comes through the middle sector, because Perez is very much not pushing, and I wouldn't be surprised if Perez gets the hump a little if Verstappen does get the fastest lap on this final tour. But nevertheless, Sergio Perez is coming into the final corner now. Left-hander of turn 27, turns it in, and for the final time he comes out onto the start-finish straight. The checker flag is waiting. Sergio Perez wins from pole position in Saudi Arabia. It's another Red Bull 1-2, but this time it's Perez who beats his teammate Verstappen to the win. But Verstappen sets the fastest lap of the race on the final lap, meaning he leads the World Championship by 1 point as we head to the next race in Australia. Third across the line is going to be Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin. A strong drive from Alonso, a lonely drive for Fernando Alonso, and he finishes 5.1 seconds clear of George Russell, so even if he gets a penalty, he will finish in third. Russell and Hamilton across the line in fourth and fifth. It's sixth for Carlos Sainz, it's 7th for Charles Leclerc, it's 8th for Esteban Ocon, 9th for Pierre Gasly, and Kevin Magnussen should hold on to 10th place. There's still squabbles going on further down the order, but there has been another goal at Old Trafford. Lee Blakeman.
Manchester United 3, Fulham 1. Bruno Fernandes with his second of the afternoon burst into the area right side, blasted it past Leno, and United are on their way to the FA Cup semi-finals. Manchester United 3, Fulham 1 as the final whistle blows.
Thank you very much, Lee. Remarkable game at Old Trafford. So United will face Brighton in the FA Cup semi-final. The other game will be Manchester City versus Sheffield United. Earlier on today, Arsenal won 4-1 against Crystal Palace to go 8 points clear at the top of the Premier League. Man City still with a game in hand. It's a drag race towards the line for 16th position, and it is Logan Sargent ahead of Lando Norris. So the finishing order: Perez, Verstappen, Alonso, Russell, Hamilton, Sainz, Leclerc, Ocon, Gasly and Magnussen, the 10 points finishers. Outside the points, well, I'll tell you them in a minute.
Wicked job. Wicked job.
Wicked. Nice job, guys. Well done. Excellent result for the team.
Fantastic, Checo. Absolutely fantastic. Really, really amazing drive. That last stint was on fire. Well done, mate.
Well done, guys. It's been an awesome first 2 races. Let's keep it up. Let's keep pushing. Plenty of more fun to have.
So Sergio Perez first hearing from his race engineer, then hearing from Christian Horner, the team principal of Red Bull, on the radio as he comes into the pit lane. Outside of the points, Tsunoda 11th, Hulkenberg, Joe, De Vries, Piastri, Sargent, Norris and Bottas, Alex Albon and Lance Stroll retiring from the Grand Prix. Here's Verstappen's radio.
It's a great recovery, well done.
Yeah, not bad. That's good result for the whole team.
Great recovery, Max. That was a really good drive. Fastest lap at the end, 31.9. 1-2 finish. Sorry about yesterday, but great points today.
Verstappen then on the radio. Great recovery drive there. They're pleased with that one, and I suppose, well, they might be.
Yeah, no, definitely pleased, and I agree with Christian. A fantastic last stint there from Sergio Perez. I mean, yeah, none of them's told him that Verstappen didn't listen to the team about fastest lap and did push to the end, as it looks like Perez has gone to the grid where he should have, and Max has peeled away into the pit lane. So miscommunication there, as Fernando is pulling up to his P3 spot as Perez stands aloft on the car, arms out. Happy days, another win to his name, but yeah, fantastic drive by him.
Sergio Perez then taking the victory. Max Verstappen second, leads the championship by a point after finishing 1-2 in the opposite order. Fernando Alonso opposite order to Bahrain in the opening race of the season, and Perez hugging all of his mechanics, high-fiving with them. We'll bring you all the reaction a little bit later on in the Checker Flag podcast. We'll be heading to 6:06 at about 1:45 in 15 minutes time or so. Later on this evening, Rugby Union Daily at 8 o'clock, looking back on the Six Nations. But Max Verstappen, after returning his car to the pit lane, is now going to, well, we'll be hearing from the top 3 in a few moments' time as Sergio Perez jumps into his cheering mechanics. But before we hear from the top 3 in the F1, let's check in with Robbie. Plenty to talk about after today, Robbie.
There certainly is, Lee. Thank you so much, Jack. Sorry. Chris, are you there?
Yes, I am here, Rob.
So much, Lee. I tell you what, let's go back to Jack Nicholls, who's just seen the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie. Sergio Perez taking the victory for Red Bull. Max Verstappen in second. We'll be back with 6:06 in 10 minutes or so. Fernando Alonso finishing third for the Aston Martin team. Russell and Hamilton fourth and fifth. We'll bring you all the reaction a little bit later on in the Checker Flag podcast, and we'll hear from the top 3 in a couple of moments' time. Alice Powell alongside me for that Grand Prix, and it was sort of as expected, except I think I expected a bit more from Ferrari overall. They were. I thought they may be fighting with Alonso at some points over that final podium spot.
Yeah, after the safety car, they sort of just disappeared, didn't they? From our screens, from the timing screens, they weren't lighting anything up. So, and again, disappointing result for them. They had a great qualifying yesterday with Leclerc. I think he really pulled it out the bag with the performance of the Ferrari, and probably outperformed the car, to be honest with you, putting it there in P2. Obviously, you got the penalty, so it was always going to be difficult. But yeah, they disappointing, and I agree. They just sort of disappeared, and they'll be disappointed. Sainz sits 4th in the championship with Leclerc down in 8th. So it's been a tough start, and again, will be head scratching from them.
So let's hear from the top 3. Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen and Fernando Alonso. They are talking to David Coulthard.
Sergio Perez, your 5th win in Formula 1, again keeping this amazing record on street circuits. That was a tough one in the end.
Yeah, it turned out to be tougher than expected. That safety car, we really did the job in the first stint, but that safety car again tried to take the victory out of us again in Jeddah, but not this time. I was on the victory last year, so finally I got it. And the team did a fantastic job. I mean, the job they've done, they've worked so hard during the weekend. You know, we had a lot of mechanical issues, and these guys have been on top of that. So I'm really happy for them, and it's time to celebrate.
For a brief moment before the end, you were leading the World Championship by dint of having the fastest lap. Max pulled that from you at the very end, so you're 2nd in the World Championship, but still a great start to this championship campaign.
Yeah, exactly. So we will keep pushing hard, and the important thing, I think, we were the fastest car out there today, so I'm very pleased with that.
Okay, well, just one brief mention of the start. You didn't seem to get off the line as clean as Fernando. We know he got a penalty for being slightly out of position, but what was going on there?
Yeah, I think there is some work to do. We've changed a bit the procedure from our side, so I think we need to do some work to get better starts in the future.
Well, we can see from the sweat on your brow, you worked for that one. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now it looks like now we have our 3rd place finisher. A brilliant start to the 2023 campaign for Fernando Alonso, and your 100th podium finish.
Yeah, what a start of the season. I mean, yeah, probably unthinkable 1 month ago when we launched the car, but yeah, these guys, they made a fantastic car, fantastic execution of the race in Bahrain and here as well. Good strategy, and yeah, 2 podiums.
Now, we know you're not so experienced in Formula 1, so you have to talk us through what you did with the position at the start of the race.
Yeah, I need to review. Obviously, I made a mistake, so yeah, when they told me 5 seconds penalty, I said, okay, I need to drive a little bit faster to make those 5 seconds, but yeah, I need to review.
You were very, very calm, that's for sure. We're seeing the sweat on your brow as well as your team celebrate your name. This is a hard Grand Prix circuit.
Yeah, it is. It is a hard Grand Prix, but yeah, those guys, they give me power, and yeah, I push all way through, like qualifying laps, and yeah, Red Bulls maybe a little bit out of reach, but the rest, they were behind, so happy for that.
Go and enjoy your podium.
Thank you.
And finally, our 2nd place finisher, still leading the World Championship because of that big push at the end there. It's not been an easy weekend for you, but you must be satisfied to have come through in 2nd.
Yeah, it wasn't very easy to get through the field. I mean, through the first sector, trying to follow in the beginning of the race was very difficult, a lot of sliding around. But once I cleared them one by one, we got into a good rhythm, and of course, yeah, very happy to be here on the podium.
There were some concerns there. We heard you talking about the drive shaft, the vibration. That righted itself, or you had that right to the finish?
Yeah, right to the finish, but I mean, I was in 2nd. We had a big gap behind, so at one point we decided to just, let's say, call it a day and just settle for 2nd, which I think anyway was a very good recovery, you know, so happy with that.
You may have settled for 2nd, but you didn't settle for not getting that point for fastest lap.
I gave it a go at the end, so luckily it worked out.
Okay, well, you're still leading the championship, Max. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So that was the top 3 in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Sergio Perez taking the win, 5 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen, 15 seconds ahead of Fernando Alonso in 3rd place. Alice Powell, a very happy Sergio Perez. Interesting to hear from Verstappen saying it was harder to come through the field than he thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on that DRS train, you know, with such a long straight and especially such early laps. They have brought it forward this year with the DRS coming a lap earlier than previous years. so it makes it tough to then pass with these long straights. No heavy braking zones as well, which adds to that. So yeah, he obviously went into that race expecting, right, do you know what, by the end of lap 10 I should be in the top 5, where obviously that didn't happen.
Is Perez in title contention? He's second in the championship, 1 point behind, is race 2 of 23.
The start of the race, I would have said no.
Yeah.
The end of this race, that second stint that he put in was phenomenal. He knew Max was behind him. He could clearly see him in his mirrors, and he just kept his cool. He kept the pace, he managed the gap really well. It stayed floating between there. Okay, Max got slightly distracted with that possible drive shaft issue, so he did drop back a little bit, but he wasn't fazed by the pace that of Verstappen that we've seen in the past. So yeah, I'd like to say now with that performance that possibly Perez is in the title fight, but Verstappen just seems to drag it out of the bag, claw it out the bag, and there's still a long way left to go. Plenty of more races to play for sure. But yeah, let's put him in there. Why not?
Well, something I will say actually is that the FIA have just announced that Fernando Alonso is under investigation for serving his penalty incorrectly. So that was towards the end of the Grand Prix. We kind of heard that the team's thinking maybe that was happening. And the penalty is, so they tried to get a 5-second advantage over George Russell, which they managed to do. But the penalty for Esteban Ocon in Bahrain for incorrectly serving the penalty was a 10-second penalty. So that, if Alonso does get done for that, he might lose his podium after all, potentially.
Yes, potentially. He'll drop down a position. So, yeah, I mean, it did look either... I don't think there is a rule where you can't serve it under safety.
No, there isn't. I did look into that.
So, yeah. So it won't be that. So it could be possibly someone touching the car. And I'm sure that the rear jack guy, he sort of went underneath the car, sort of lifted the jack ever so slightly. So maybe it did make contact with the rear of the car. And, we saw, I think, what did I say yesterday? I can't remember the exact time. It was like 0.4 of a second or 0.04 of Esteban Ocon, a mechanic touching his car. So, yeah, if that is the case, they'll review footage, because we obviously had live pictures of the rear jack guy. Could be a 10-second penalty coming his way for sure.
So the championship standings after the second race of the season, Max Verstappen is at the top on 44 points, 1 point ahead of Sergio Perez. Fernando Alonso, with his 2 third-place finishes, is on 30 points, so 14 points off Verstappen in the lead. It's 20 points for Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton, 2 points ahead of George Russell in 6th, as the champagne, the fizzy rosewater is sprayed on the podium in Saudi Arabia. A win for Sergio Perez, his 5th victory in Formula One, and a very, very impressive one indeed. But Max Verstappen, by dint of taking that fastest lap, gets 1 point ahead of Perez. What does that say about Max Verstappen, Alice, that he wants that 1 point? Because to me it doesn't say, we touched on, is Perez in the championship fight? It's tough to see that he is, considering Verstappen's speed. But Verstappen doing everything he can to get that 1 extra point is either he thinks this title's going to go down to the wire and he needs every point possible, or he's just flexing. Like, I
think a little bit of both. I mean, he knows Max will be stood, driving that car around and stood there up on that podium, looking down at his team, cheering. No, I've definitely got this under control. He's a very confident guy. He's very clever, very switched on. So he will know that it's motorsport. He's been around in the sport for a long time. Anything could happen. A few DNFs, retirements could swing it into someone else's favour. It's happened in the long history of Formula One before. So he's going to take every point that he can. For sure, but I think also a little bit of flexing, just reminding Sergio, a bit of mind games there, saying, okay, yeah, you may have won the race, but I'm still the fastest man on the track.
You can hear the fireworks erupting all over the Red Sea to the west of Saudi Arabia after Not the greatest race that this Jeddah street circuit has ever seen. The previous two were pretty good, though, to be fair. But Verstappen couldn't close in on Perez, couldn't take the victory, but he has got the lead of the World Championship. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. We will have all the reaction and hear from all of the front runners and a few more in the Checker Flag podcast, which will be available later on this evening. We'll be back with the Australian Grand Prix in a couple of weeks' time. But now here on 5 Live, it's over to Chris Sutton and Robbie Savage for 606.
Thanks so much, Jack. Yeah, we got a big 606 coming up, haven't we, Chris? Fulham, what were they doing? A minute and a half.